you need a partner at City Hall. Someone who's not new to working with you to create more housing in this city, to make sure that this city is growing. Let's remember, even before COVID hit, our city was shrinking. And that was because we had a mayor who demonized and divided us, too often saw the private sector and real estate as the enemy, rather than a partner to work with, to grow our city, to invest and make sure that we're creating more housing and the affordable housing that every New Yorker needs. Hey, I'm Shaun Donovan. I'm a lifelong New Yorker and I am running for mayor. New York is the best city in the world, but that also means a lot of people want to live here. And that means that far too many people can't afford to live here. And we need a mayor who can actually get rental assistance to folks to help afford to live where they do, and to help owners of properties, particularly small properties around this city, survive this pandemic. You have a lot of small owners in this city who don't want to work with the city, the red tape, the bureaucracy. You have immigrant owners who may need to work with the city in a different language or need help to get through the red tape. So we need not only the financial assistance, loans, tax breaks, grants, we also need the city to have a proactive enforcement system that actually reaches out to owners and helps them fix up their buildings and make sure that all housing is in good condition in the city. We should have requirements, particularly on bigger buildings, that they include affordable housing. But at the end of the day, we also know that you can't ever force someone to build something. And so you do need to work with the real estate industry in this city, with owners and with managers, to incentivize the development of affordable housing as well. I'm an all of the above kind of guy on housing. I believe we have to work with real estate owners and managers in this city. That's what I've done for my entire career. But we also ought to be looking for ways to create land banks and other ways, cooperatives and others, where ownership happens at the community level and the individual level. It's not either or. We do need to engage communities in planning what I call 15-minute neighborhoods, so that everyone has, within 15 minutes of their front door, everything they need for opportunity: great school for their kids, a great job, transportation to a job that sustains their families. And we also need to have a citywide plan, as we did under Mayor Bloomberg, that really sets out how much more housing do we need and how are we going to get there? How are we going to build more housing near transportation, and make sure that every community is doing their fair share. I don't think we really know yet how it's worked. I do believe that the most urgent thing we need is to get rental assistance to folks to stay in their homes and to help buildings be able to pay expenses and not fall apart at this time when we have a real risk of losing the housing that is so important in our city. I'm a believer that at a time when we need more affordable housing, we should be using every tool we have. 421A needs to be fixed, not eliminated. I've never met anyone who's a big fan of our property tax system. First, what we need to do is make our property tax system simpler and fairer and more transparent. But the second problem with it is that it's totally imbalanced. We know that 2/3 of New Yorkers are renters, and yet renters pay far more in property taxes than most owners. And there's huge imbalances between owners in low-income and Black and brown communities and owners elsewhere in the city. So we do need reform, and it is time to make our property taxes in this city fairer, more transparent, and more equitable. I believe we need real reform of our property tax system, not tinkering around the edges. And so I don't believe we should make changes like that. I think we have to really reform the system more fundamentally to make it more transparent and fairer. And this is not the time to be increasing costs and standing in the way of creating more small businesses, opening those storefronts again, and encouraging people to build, not raising taxes. I think we need to work together cooperatively with owners, with small businesses, and make sure that there's folks are only evicted or moved out, whether it's of housing or retail, for good cause. And I think that ought to be the default. But I don't think that some of the current laws that are being proposed will work effectively, especially in a moment of crisis. Well, first, I think we need to get assistance to renters. If we get more assistance to people, that's going to help with those upfront costs. I am concerned about the recent decision that puts brokers' fees onto residents. As somebody who's worked on housing across the country, I've seen that a model works better where that's the responsibility of landlords and owners of buildings rather than on the residents themselves, particularly when we have such an affordability crisis in the city. I have the most comprehensive, clear plan of anybody in this race to get to the $40 billion that we need to fix public housing. More than $30 billion of that could come from the federal government. But I also know that we need to make a $2 billion a year investment of city capital into public housing. And if we're innovative and creative about the ways we invest in green energy at NYCHA, solar, and other new sources, we could actually raise, through energy performance contracts, over $6 billion as well to invest. Lastly, it's not just the money, but we have to change the way public housing is managed. So there's real accountability, site-based management that actually fixes the problems when they happen, not lets them fester and become much bigger problems in the longer run. So I'm a believer that we need to keep public ownership of public housing. I am open to working to create new housing on public housing land as a way both to accommodate the huge need for affordable housing, but also because we have so many public housing residents that deserve better. There are lots of creative ways that we could develop new affordable housing on public housing land while providing investment that would fix existing public housing developments as well. So, as a housing secretary who gave real meaning to the Fair Housing Act of 1968, who increased enforcement around what's called disparate impact and affirmatively furthering fair housing, this is a critical step that we have to take to make sure that every New Yorker, regardless of their source of income, can actually get the housing that they need. Just today, actually, the Biden administration reestablished those rules that I created, and it's critical that we have a mayor who really understands how to ensure that every New Yorker, regardless of what they look like, who they love, who they worship, or what their source of income is, can live wherever they choose and find an affordable place in our city. I think they should be legal, but regulated in a way that they don't increase our affordable housing crisis in the city. If I were mayor, we would have been able to get Amazon done and Industry City done in the right way. We need a mayor who can build a coalition for equitable growth, can really bring together local community-based leaders and make sure that revitalization happens with and for a community, not to a community. I misheard the question and I made a mistake, but I understand why that mistake got attention, because we do have more people on the verge of eviction today than any time in our history. We do have more people sleeping on our streets and in shelter than any time since the Depression. And that's exactly why I've dedicated 30 years, my entire career, to making sure that housing is affordable and that we're reducing homelessness in the city. And when I led the strategy for President Obama, we dramatically reduced homelessness around the country. In fact, with a big assist from Michelle Obama, we ended veteran homelessness in 80 cities. That's my record. I've worked my entire career to make housing more affordable in this city, and that's what I'm gonna do as mayor. When we have far more demand for affordable housing than we can provide, I do think that we need to find a fair, transparent way to make that housing available. But I also believe that, especially at a time when so many folks are at risk of being pushed out of their communities, when gentrification is happening in this city, we need to make sure that we're focusing on allowing residents to stay in their communities as well. And so, done in the right way, a community preference can help do that. We need to make sure that people can afford to stay in their homes, but also that we're preserving and improving the housing that we have. That's why my eviction plan really focuses on ensuring that we're getting rental assistance quickly to everyone who needs it, but also supporting especially our small landlords who are at risk of seeing their properties fall into decline. As a kid who grew up in this city in the 1970s and 80s, we can't go back there. We can't lose the affordable housing stock that we have because it's precious.